At a certain point in the 20th century, Alaska became a hotbed of military activity.
The first warnings were not emergency sirens or public broadcasts. They were silent, iron-fisted directives that instantly froze the vast Alaskan wilderness. Pilots approaching Anchorage found themselves inexplicably diverted mid-air. Coast Guard vessels were recalled without explanation. Then, the roadblocks appeared. Overnight, every major inland artery was guarded by stern, nameless personnel.
Feels like something far more powerful than just weather has struck this place.
Alaska, defined by its isolation, was suddenly and completely shut down. A total silent blackout. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't an environmental crisis. This was the hyper-precise containment of a discovery so monumental it threatened to shatter centuries of human history, throwing a curtain of absolute secrecy across a region larger than many nations. They weren't hiding a crisis, they were hiding a truth. And that truth lay waiting, dormant, beneath the ancient ice. The anomaly under the ice. Deep beneath the ancient ice, something had indeed been found. And it began with a whisper of vibration. The origins of the discovery traced back to a small, unassuming research team mapping glacial movement. They detected tremors that bore no relation whatsoever to natural seismic activity. Instead, these strange pulses exhibited a rhythmic, almost mechanical consistency, repeating at intervals too exact to be natural. Intrigued, the researchers deployed arrays of ground-penetrating radar across the area. The image that returned seemed utterly impossible. A massive, artificial structure with perfectly symmetrical edges, buried more than 1 mile beneath the compacted ice. The object was vast, possessing angles sharper than anything nature could sculpt, and proportions so immense that the first assumption was a catastrophic error in the readings. But the readings were consistent, outlining the contours of something colossal. When those findings reached the federal level, everything changed. All civilian authority vanished. The site was immediately classified, reassigned to a secret network of agencies, and specialized teams were flown into the region under the cover of darkness. They were not investigating an anomaly, they were containing a presence, and their first priority was silence. Older than humanity. And what they were containing was older than anyone could imagine. As excavation crews began peeling back layers of glacial ice in meticulous stages, each new stratum introduced evidence that the structure was far older than even the oldest geological models allowed. The ice surrounding the object had formed gradually over tens of thousands of years, but the material embedded within it showed absolutely no signs of erosion or deformation. That meant the structure had been there before the ice formed, untouched by all the ages that followed. The chilling realization settled upon the team. Whatever this was, it had existed long before the first humans ever crossed into the region. This implied an origin story that defied established history. No known culture, ancient or modern, possessed the material science capable of constructing something so enduring, surviving intact in such extreme conditions for such a staggering span of time. The outer shell was smooth to the point of unnatural perfection. Scanners failed to measure its density, and instruments failed to pierce it. The object was a monumental secret buried by epochs, resisting every attempt to be understood. The structure is alive. Yet this monumental secret was not a ruin. While the surface was impenetrable, teams began to notice an unsettling phenomenon. The faint, rhythmic pulses detected earlier were accompanied by a barely perceptible warmth radiating from the object. This warmth fluctuated in sync with the strange pulses, causing sudden condensation that frosted the edges of their instruments. If the structure had been dormant, its temperature should have matched its environment. Instead, it exhibited an internal stability that suggested something far more dynamic. Analysts attempting to decode the faint, rhythmic pulses noted they were almost musical in their consistency, like a long-forgotten metronome keeping time in the dark. They possessed qualities of electromagnetic signals, acoustic vibrations, and radio emissions, but fully conformed to none. The implication was undeniable. The structure was not a lifeless relic. It had been maintaining this controlled internal state for an unimaginably long period, like a great frozen heart keeping time in the dark, patiently waiting. An awakening, the system responds. The question of whether it was active soon became the question of whether it was aware. As excavation progressed, the structure's rhythmic pulses began to change. Their frequency drifted, sometimes accelerating, sometimes slowing, as if they were directly reacting to the sound and presence of the equipment. Instruments recorded fluctuations that aligned perfectly with moments when heavy machinery drew near the surface. These correlations were undeniable. The object was unmistakably responding, but whether this signified awareness, defense, or an automated protocol was entirely unknown. The discovery of the true scale only amplified the urgency. It was not a singular entity, but a sprawling network expanding horizontally beneath the ice, with the excavated portion being only a small fragment of a gigantic, incomprehensible system. This prompted a dramatic shift in strategy. Manual teams replaced heavy machinery and engineers designed delicate tools to cut through the ice with minimal disturbance. They could no longer treat the structure as an archaeological curiosity. It was potentially a device, a vessel, or something entirely beyond classification, and they had unintentionally started to wake it up. The government expanded its restricted zones, quietly relocating communities, and the official narrative shifted to emphasize dangerous environmental destabilization to justify the broadening lockdown. The iridescent panel and guided interaction. This awakening soon revealed its command center. The continued meticulous work toward a predicted entry point revealed an iridescent, subtly contoured panel, unlike the rest of the seamless exterior. This section bore faint impressions, almost like symbols worn faintly into its surface. The markings defied translation but were clearly arranged with a deliberate purpose that hinted at sequential meaning. As the teams gathered, the rhythmic pulses intensified, manifesting as vibrations detectable by touch, the sensation of standing near a great engine idling far underground. The air around the panel grew subtly warmer, hinting at an immediate activation. Personnel stationed too close reported unfamiliar sensations, subtle tingling across the skin, and inexplicable clarity of thought that vanished as soon as they left the immediate area. The first attempt to interact with the panel using a robotic arm caused an instantaneous sensor overload. Yet the contact triggered a profound change. The shimmering lines on the panel steadied into a pattern, and the pulses realigned into a new frequency, sharper and more deliberate. For the first time, the structure was no longer merely reacting. It was engaging, the transition and the void. And that engagement led them to the threshold. Through a series of guided interactions where the panel subtly directed the movements of a new robotic probe, the panel's surface softened and rippled like liquid metal, drawing its symbols inward until it achieved a strange transparency. Then a narrow seam appeared along its edge, unfolding to reveal a darkness within. This darkness was not the ordinary absence of light. It was dense, almost textured, a void that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Instruments that attempted to measure its interior returned impossible data. Infinite depth, zero reflection, absence of measurable temperature. It was as though the opening did not lead into the structure, but into something else entirely, a space that defied physical expectation. A specialized drone was immediately sent through this threshold. Its video feed did not go dark, but instead revealed shifting planes of light, forming and dissolving with no walls, no surfaces, and no boundaries. Only fluid geometry that seemed to rearrange itself based on the drone's movement. Team members debated whether the drone had entered a chamber or a field of engineered space. The eye of the vortex and the revelation. Deeper inside, the geometric formations converged, and the drone crossed into a circular pulsing vortex. Particles suspended within the vortex, oscillating in a rhythmic dance, aligned into a pattern that remained stable for several seconds. The formation resembled an eye, not literally, but symbolically, a shape composed of radiating lines that expanded and contracted as though observing. The panel outside responded instantly, widening the seam and raising the ambient tone into a perfect harmonic. The structure had acknowledged the drone's presence, recognized its observation, and adjusted its behavior accordingly. The drone drifted forward, crossed into the vortex, and the feed cleared, revealing what lay beyond. It was impossible. Not a chamber, not a machine, not a space that obeyed any familiar metric of geometry, but a world unto itself, constructed from principles inscrutable and sublime. It was not an aftermath. It was only the beginning of the structure's revelation, demanding an immediate reevaluation of everything humanity thought it knew. If you want to stay on the front lines of discovery and dive deep into the most complex mysteries ever uncovered, smash the like button and subscribe to Mysteries Uncovered Files. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation into the untold secrets of our world.